Hi and welcome everybody. Welcome to a new episode of Fresh Jazzy Sounds. An extra special episode. It is amazing, but again I have a test pressing, this time of Misha Panfilov, his latest album where he is playing in a Septet setting, and I'm eager to share it with you, as I am the record store releases that I got last week from Record Store Day. Together with fresh new releases, let's start. Let's put the needle in the groove. And we start off with Kahil El Sabar Quartet, an album released at the end of 2022, A Time for Healing. And it is a time for healing. Of course, recorded in the Corona period. The music is really special. It is really going back to basics in a sense. Kahil El Sabar is a drummer, percussion player. He is joined by new artists, names I was familiar with, but they have an interplay. They grab back to percussions from ancient time, mix it with jazz, mix it with a certain groove, and that makes this album special, especially disc 1. Disc 1 disc 2 is good, but this one is special. The first disc has songs that are long, that are repetitive, and that you really put you in a groove with a sound that is fresh and new. And for the next album we're moving down under to Melbourne, Australia with David Versace, or maybe it's called Versace. I'm not really sure. To not get in trouble, let's call the album by David. It's called Okra, not Orca. Okra. It has that flavor, that fresh sound that is mixing broken beat with UK jazz and a little bit moving in the direction of jazz funk. It really has a danceable vibe, a danceable groove. I really like it. I would almost call it a funky album. It has been written, produced and mixed by David, although on the album he is also joined by other artists, with musicians, which create a sound that is really groovy. This is probably what you're waiting for, the latest release or the test press by Misha Panfilov, his latest album. It will be called Gala and it is recorded in a Septet setting. And that means that Misha is not playing a lot of instruments, he's only playing one instrument, the lap steel guitar. And the album, it has a special atmosphere, because you would expect in a Septet setting that a lot of people are playing all the time and they're blowing to get the highest note, but it isn't. It is very laid back and it really grows on you after each spin. And that has mostly to do with the atmosphere. The music is recorded in one room with all the musicians together, and there is a certain interaction, a certain interplay between the musicians, and there is luckily a short clip of the recording that I want to show next. And it is fun to see that on the label it says 4-pole Fresh Jazzy Sounds. Also the inserts, it mentions the title of the album, Gala. It will be released, by the way, on Funk Night Records. Release will be halfway of May. It is number 200. He also put on the names of the different tracks. We are now listening on side A to Dryland, and the next I want to sample is Draw Us Here. are the records that I got for Record Store Day, and I must honestly say I have a love-hate relationship with Record Store Day. I hated to be in line, crowded shops, it's nothing for me, but you can't escape Record Store Day. There is always something special, and I don't know how they do it, because it would have been so easy to just say, well, just let's skip it this year. But also 2023, they put some records on the list that I just wanted to have. Great example is Ocean's 12, the soundtrack. Soundtrack is from 2004, so it's a long time ago, almost 20 years. It is done by David Holmes. He puts in the album his own songs and a compilation of old library tracks, and that is what this thing makes so special. Because I don't know if you remember, Ocean 12 was set in Europe, and what he takes are library songs from albums from, I think, end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. And that gives this certain flavor, which also is incorporated in his own songs. Because on every side you play, there is that same mix. An own song, maybe an old Italian library song. I will sample that, for example, next. This is by Pieri Ulmiami, famous, but the songs he selected from those library albums, that is really obscure, and he must be a vinyl collector himself, because to get these songs and know about them, that's special. So here you have the Italian library song, which is really mellow. If it needs to be more fast-paced, he takes some more French prog rock songs from the early 70s. There is library songs from the UK. It is done so well. I'm so happy that I could grab this one. If you're in Europe, I think very few copies are in Europe. Most of them are stored in the US. If you see it, check it out. I'm sure you're going to like it. And I don't know why, but it's always happening to me. When I go through the bins on Record Store Day, I miss stuff. And when I later see videos on the VC, I think, stupid, should have gotten that album. And that is certainly true for the next album. Luckily, the store, my local store, 2 days later still had the album. It's the album by Ernest Rangling, Below the Baseline. It's from '96. That also shows a little bit on the cover. It's a little bit, well, let's say typical 90s, but the music is special. It's really hard to put a date on the music. It is Ernest Rangling together with his mate Monty Alexander on piano. They've been together, I think they were making music in the 70s, maybe already earlier in the 60s. Ernest Rangling is playing the guitar, Monty Alexander the piano. They are joined by Ira Coleman on double bass. And that acoustic bass on this album, that really puts the reggae into the music. The beats he produces, the way it is recorded, it really is on the foreground, the bass. It's beautiful. And then to summarize everything up, you have Idris Muhammad on drums. He doesn't do any drum solos, but he's really playing it in the pocket. And on the next sample that I want to play, it's called None Shall Escape the Judgment. You can really hear that the interplay is brilliant. And the next album is a fresh album from the Netherlands, Basement Membrame, called Punk Funk. It is an EP, short songs, about 6 songs, 3 on each side. No, 4 on side B. It has that beatmaker sound. Although in this one they certainly go in a jazzy vibe, and I really like it for that reason. It has a jazzy vibe, it goes a little bit beyond what I normally listen to. And maybe if you listen to the sample you think, no, this is what I listen to all the time. Well, that's because I'm cheating. This is an EP, you have to play it on 45. I'm now playing it on 33. And especially side A on 33 RPM, it sounds even better as on 45 RPM. But I don't want to cheat on you and I will sample the next part on 45. And it is always fun to play around with the speeds of records. You can get some funny results. And the next album by Lorenzo, Morresi and Tenderlonious, Cosmica Italia, it is a kind of modern library album or library sounds. You have of course Lorenzo Morresi, who plays a lot of the synths, also the guitar on this one. Tenderlonious of course plays the sax and the flute, mainly the flute as you recognize. On the grooves that you hear are usually cinematic grooves, library grooves, moving in a certain direction. And I'm cheating again, I'm playing it on 45. The real speed of this album is 33. And what you now hear is probably more relating to the cinematic grooves that I mentioned. The music on the album really goes in the direction music made by Lorenzo Morresi. He really goes in that kind of special Italian mix. I think that's also why it's called Cosmica Italia. Tenderlonious really knew that and he really cooperated together and they created together a beautiful album.